Well, the question will be, why is Western civilization declining? Because late-stage capitalist
Sure.
theory is just an analysis of the economic conditions we're living under.
Well, let's talk about the cultural Marxism thing because that's fun and uh, silly in my opinion. So, okay, you said cultural Marxism. Jordan Peterson has used the term cultural Marxism. He really uses the term postmodern neo-Marxism a bit more, which we can talk about postmodernism because you yourself are a postmodernist, correct?
Probably. It's complicated, but yeah, I'm highly sympathetic to their influences.
That sounds like something a postmodernist would say, but that's fair. Um, so so the implication is Jordan Peterson. First off, I disagree that he's using culture when Jordan Peterson talks about cultural Marxism. He's not referencing a Nazi conspiracy. He's referring to the impact of Marxism on culture, which is exactly what it sounds like.
Which
And
is what the Nazis were talking about.
okay, well, the Nazis were not big fans of, well, Israel didn't exist yet, but the Nazis were not big fan of uh, Jewish people. And it's like, okay, if Ilhan Omar pushes for BDS, boycott, divest, sanction Israel, does that make her a Nazi because she agreed with Nazis?
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with protesting Israel, but if she was an anti-Semite, I would say that's definitely a parallel between her and the Nazis.
Yeah, but the evidence that you're citing for Jordan Peterson being an anti-Semite is that he's repeating the talking points of Nazis, and I could just as easily say anyone
I'm
who
only saying
criticizes
it's the
Israel is repeating the talking points of
I'm
Nazis,
only
which is
saying it's the
true.
same conspiracy theory. The idea that Frankfurt School academic intellectual communists
Uh-huh.
infiltrated American culture and are destroying it from within. That's what I want to know. Why do people believe the West is in decline? I'm not entirely sure if I understand that. Our GDP is skyrocketing compared to that of China's, India's, and well, broadly the rest of the world's. We have the strongest military. I don't know what people mean when they say the West is in
Interesting.
decline.
For a Marxist, that's a remarkably capitalist defense of the growth of the West, saying that the GDP has gone up. I believe life expectancy is going down. Mental health issues are increasing rapidly. People are deleting themselves to be TOS friendly at increasing rates. There's more and more polarization. The idea that what are people referring to when the civilization has decline? To me, that's an indication of how you might not be paying attention as close as you could, because I
Well,
think it's
I do.
obvious that there are a lot of
I mean,
issues.
I'm being
Well,
kind of facetious here. I know that when people talk about the West being in decline, they're usually talking about cultural Marxism, immigration, Muslims, and leftism. I see a lot of West is in decline stuff whenever you see like drag queens, for example, because the West is in decline because they're wearing frilly clothing, for example. I hear the West is in decline in response to a lot of stuff. If the West was
okay.
truly in decline over mental health issues, I'm not entirely sure why conservatives are so opposed to the concept of SSRIs or therapy broadly. It
Well,
seems like,
certainly Jordan Peterson is the opposite of that. He specifically says that if you've got mental health issues, you should give SSRIs a try. And he's
sure,
a clinical therapist himself.
in that respect, he might be better than the average conservative milieu, but the
Might
fear
be a
mongering about the
slightly
West being
kind
in
Nazi,
decline.
but not
Hmm?
a slightly kind Nazi, but not an all the way bad one.
Oh, he
If
is.
he's
I stand by the fascist accusation. Again, he talks about cultural Marxism on and on and on and on and on.
okay,
Uh,
so are
the,
people who support Jordan Peterson, does that make them fascist by implication?
No, I mean, I think it means they like a fascist, but unfortunately, in the current political climate, it seems pretty difficult to avoid that if you're even mildly tolerant of like center leaning media, because there's a lot of people there who are kind of like edging on the side of things.
Okay. Okay. The reason I'm pondering for a moment is because you understand what you're saying, what you've been saying the past few minutes is very different from what you say in many of your videos. Would you agree?
Well, I call him a fascist in those videos too.
Well, you say uh, you say a variety of things about like conservatives in general, like that what is it? They're no different from the KK. Conservatives today are no different from the KKK in the who were, I think the quote was, frothing at the mouth, keeping black people away from integrated schools. You said that, and now it seems like you are not standing by those beliefs and taking it back and hiding your power level a bit.
No, I still stand with whatever it was I said back there. I don't think there's much of an ideological difference between a modern American conservative and a member of the Ku Klux Klan. It's just a continuation of existing ideals. It's not exactly a like a conspiracy, that there was like this huge wave of Ku Klux Klan support that was kind of backed by conservative politicians at the time. Those politicians lasted a long time too, and a lot of their ideological forebears, right up until the civil rights movement, they were pretty open and friendly with a lot of really obviously anti-black stuff. And then civil rights movement happens, the act gets passed, and can't say the N-word anymore. But a lot of the same people stayed in office, and a lot of their children and friends ran and won in their offices later. And it makes you wonder just how much stuff they kept bottled up. At any rate, the ideology is still remarkably similar.
So
Xenophobia
my
and nativism are the big driving forces of modern conservatism. And I think
Mhm.
Jordan Peterson plays into that quite a lot as well,
So
largely with the cultural Marxism bit.
okay, the reason I'm not being as warm and welcoming as I could otherwise be is what you said. The implication of what you said is that, for example, my conservative friends and family members are no different than the Ku Klux Klan. Do you understand why that limits the degree to which I can take a lot of the other things you say seriously, and why many people in general don't take as much as you say seriously as they might otherwise?
Well, I'm not trying to hide in audacity. I think it's a fairly straightforward assessment of where modern American conservatism is. I mean, do you think that families of the Ku Klux Klan back 120 years ago didn't talk with each other as normal people? Everybody thinks they're normal, right? But obviously, with
But it's just
retrospect,
us with conservative friends and family members who are literally as bad as the Ku Klux Klan today. That's what you're saying. The Ku
what do
Klux
you
Klan
think?
who burned down the homes of black people with black children in them
Mhm.
and hung them. You're saying my friends and family members, people watching this who have friends and family members who are conservative, they're just as bad. That's what you're saying.
Well, nowadays, you would instead cheer on a racist policing system that's used to disproportionately inflict violence against black people. So you've sort of delegated the violence to a system, a very expensive one at that. Sheesh, at least the taxes didn't pay for the KKK. But fundamentally, I think that the parallels remain there. They're not the same in terms of like the
Okay,
exact extent of the harm they commit interpersonally. Obviously, I'm talking about ideological synchronicity. But yeah,
sure.
no, I mean, the modern American conservative, right, this is a template of fascism. If I believe, for example, that Ron DeSantis and Trump are both fascists, which I do, and the GOP is a fascist org, why would I not believe then that conservatives in America today are themselves, I mean, at least fascist sympathizers, right? Like, not individually, every single one of them is like an ideological fascist, but they're at the
Mhm.
very least, they're part of the movement. It's not meant as an
Okay.
insult. Obviously, I disagree with it, but I
It's
think
not
it's
meant as an
important to recognize
insult.
it.
Hey, you and your friends and family who might have voted for Trump, they're as bad as the KKK. You don't understand why people would take that as an insult?
Ideologically descendant of the KKK. You can take it as an
Oh.
insult, but I think we have
Oh, I
to
see. It's
we have to
much
reach
better.
that middle ground before we can have any
You're not
reasonable
a Ku
discussion on
Klux Klan
fascism.
member who hates black people. You're just an ideological descendant of a Ku Klux Klan member who hates black people. I think that is a condescending defense of an indefensible position.
Well, it's not meant. I'm not meant to be Weasley when I say that. I just genuinely think that is the case, right? I mean, like we would have to acknowledge, for example, that
S- s-
the
s-
conservative parties in modern day Germany would have had ideological roots in Nazis,
Hold on,
right?
hold on.
The conservative party, the current leader of Italy, for example, literally like a direct lineage of the supporters of Mussolini. So I think it would be fair then to say the people who voted for her would be ideologically in line
Yes,
with
I,
her,
I
right?
understand the formula of the argument you're making. You
Right.
said you genuinely believe in what you're saying. So you're saying, do you have any friends? Do you hang out with anyone who is a fascist or a conservative, although it's the same word? Do you have any friends who are? Yeah, I'll leave it open because
There are a couple of online people I talk to friendly who are,
okay.
I
So
would consider such, yes.
okay, so if you believe that conservatives are literally Ku Klux Klan members, literally ideological descendants, we'll keep it tight. Why are you hanging out with them?
Well, I don't
What
think
does
there's
that
any
say about you and your character?
I mean, some people might disagree. There are people on the left who get mad at me, by the way. They got mad at me for being friends with Shu, still do. They're mad at me for all sorts of things. But their opinions aren't really what matters here, right? I don't think it morally compromises me to have a friendly conversation with a person of any ideological disposition. I've never been the kind of person who thought that every interaction you have with somebody you disagree with has to be like a shouting match or anything. But I feel like this is genuinely not directed as an insult. Okay, so
I
whatever
don't
you may
believe
think.
that.
Okay, here, out of curiosity, what do you think of communism? Of the ideology, what do you think of
Um,
its lineage, of its effect?
there are some things I like better than communism.
Some things.
Yeah, like ice cream.
Okay, gotcha. But you would probably put it below the 50-50 par, right?
Probably. That's a fair statement.
So whatever associations you may have with communism, you could fairly draw that line to me for my ideology and its precedent, whatever
Mhm.
use you'd think you would get out of this discussion for it, if we were talking about something like that specifically. But my goal here is not, oh, haha, now that I have denounced you as the fascist, we can move on, we can leave, you are bad now. My goal is, these are the ideological roots of where you're coming from. This is like the
So what is
groundwork.
your goal? Is your goal, I'm just a genuine question. And let me just say, I have a lot of thoughts based on the last 15, 20 minutes of our conversation. I have said specifically that I do not think that you are a uniquely bad person, or you're not capable of any unique level of harm that anyone else is, right? You've had cameras on, you have a huge audience. So naturally, the impact of everything you say is going to be worse, but there's nothing unique per se about you. In fact, that's central to Jordan Peterson's whole body of work, is that each of us have the capacity to be a Nazi camp guard. And had we been in Weimar, Germany, it's likely that most of us would. And so you have to understand that capacity for harm. And so I'm actually, the reason I sympathize with what you just said about, just because you disagree with someone doesn't mean you need to have a screaming match with them or whatnot. You can still be friends with them. And I'm to the degree that I'm able, I'm trying to engage with you honestly for the same reason. But I guess it confuses me, because if you are genuinely interested in, let's say, combating fascism, then it seems like you would recognize that calling people's friends and family KKK members, or equivalent to the KKK, equivalent to people who lynched black people, that would impede your goal of trying to get to a common understanding. Is that not reasonable? Is that not a reasonable critique that one could levy against you?
Well, the problem is, I think the opposite has actually been the case. The aversion to calling, a spade has actually been a huge detriment to American politics. We've basically been seeing like the resurgence of a
Sure.
modern American fascist movement being built up like brick by brick. And this entire time we've been thinking, oh, it's hyperbolic to call it this. It's over the top. You're God-lawing the entire conversation. It's worthless. You're being silly. You're ostracizing people. And right now, Ron DeSantis is threatening felony charges for teachers who have degenerate material in their
Taught
books, by
critical
which
race
any
theory, right?
mention of sexuality or gender,
And that too.
providing government-backed white lists for stuff they're allowed to show. And it's like, oh, that's literally just like a Nazi policy, like explicitly, straightforwardly, like you will be held to account if you spread degeneracy to the school children. Um,
Sure,
Degeneracy
which
in this
Jordan
case being
Peterson
gender.
has condemned the attempts of Ron DeSantis to censor critical race theory. So that would put him squarely on the opposite end of the fascist spectrum.
But he does
I lost my place.
nonetheless attack, in this case, everything that the left has to do with the gender, sexuality, trans people, and the
Okay.
like. I did find the quote, by the way,
Yeah,
when
go
he was
ahead.
talking about Putin in Ukraine and
Yeah.
Putin's reasoning for invading Ukraine. He did literally describe the U.S. ideology of gender ideology, gender
Uh-huh.
norms as degenerate. He actually said the word, which I didn't remember, but
Sure. He didn't say that. He didn't say Elliot Page was degenerate. He didn't call out that name, but he said that the broader movement towards cutting off the breasts of 13-year-olds is degenerate. That's fair.
no,
I
he
agree with
he
that, by the
no,
way,
no, no.
in case that wasn't clear.
He said U.S. culture wars were degenerate.
That's what
And
he's
then he
referring to.
said that it was irresponsible of Elliot Page to exist in public while showcasing that what he is calling degeneracy in this video. So this is directly like Nazi ideology. He's even using the term. We don't have to do any inference on his intentions. It's pretty straightforward.
Um, Again, I think if you accept that there is a concerning trend of children having medical procedures performed on them,
There isn't.
and that, again, separate debate, and we'll pull up the studies and we'll see who's right rather than who sounds more confident when they assert it.